All right, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. My name is Jorge Acosta Palmer, and I am the director of the statewide training initiative for Florida Legal Services. Thank you for joining us here today to learn about navigating the 2024 legislative session updates to Florida's PACE program and Consumer Finance Act. Before I introduce our moderator, I just want to go through some quick housekeeping announcements. This training is being recorded. You're going to receive a copy of this recording in an email from Zoom, not me, within 24 hours. If you don't see that email, just feel free to shoot me an email. I'll drop my email in the chat just in case. This training was approved by the Florida Bar for 1 General CLE credit and 1 Business Litigation Certification Credit. I'll announce the code towards the end of the session. I'll drop it in the chat. You will also see the CLE code information on the email that you will get from Zoom as well. Closed captions are enabled for anybody who needs them. If you're having any issues with accessibility or the captions, you can reach out to me directly. And let me make sure I have the final piece. Questions and answers. We do have the Q&A feature enabled. You can drop your questions in there. Try to keep some of these towards the end, but also if we see that, if we have the ability to do so, we'll try to answer your question live if possible. So this meeting is being hosted by Pills, but I'm not going to touch on Pills because I'm going to pass this on to Laura Boeckman. So she's going to be our moderator, and she can talk a little bit about our co-host, the public interest law section of the Florida Bar, and introduce our speakers. So passing it on to you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Jorge. So the public interest law section, if you're not already a member, I strongly encourage you to join. So we have a consumer/tenant work group that focuses on issues like you'll hear about today, and also tenant issues as well. And as a section, we have the freedom to be able to lobby and write amicus briefs and advocate on the issues that are important to tenants and consumers. So I strongly encourage you to join if you're not already a member, and please become a member of our work group as well. We're very honored to have 2 very prominent members of our work group and the Florida Bar who are nationally recognized for their work. So first we have Lynn Drysdale, who's a consumer protection attorney who's been with Jacksonville Area Legal Aid for over 3 decades. She represents consumers in individual and class cases and engages in legislative advocacy relating to debt collection, payday loans, home improvement, PACE transactions, military lending, and mortgage litigation. She's been an active member of the Florida Bar Code and Rules of Evidence Committee, Small Claims Committee, Public Interest Law Section, and was the chair of the Consumer Protection Law Committee. She's testified before the Florida House and Senate, the Federal Reserve Board, the Federal Trade Commission, twice by invitation before the United States Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. She was awarded the 2001 National Consumer Law Center's Byrne Countryman Consumer Law Award, and she's the 2014 Consumer Protection Lawyer of the Year, is named by the Florida Bar Consumer Protection Law Committee. She was appointed during the Obama administration to the Consumer Advisory Committee of the United States Consumer Financial Protection Bureau until she and her colleagues on the committee were fired by Trump. Alice Vickers is also joining us today. Alice is a former director of the National Alliance for Consumer Protection, a statewide nonpartisan nonprofit that provided research, education, and advocacy on consumer protection and tenants' rights. Prior to joining FLACP, she was a legal services attorney for 28 years, and for 20 of those years through the Florida Legal Services, where she advocated for clients on tenants' rights and consumer protection for the Florida legislature. She's been a proud member of the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar for many years, and we're very grateful to have her. She currently lives in Los Angeles with her husband and provides pro bono assistance to nonprofits around public policy and advocacy on non-bank predatory lending. So even though Alice has left Florida, she has not left us alone, and we are eternally grateful for all of her work. So I'm now going to turn it over to Lynn Drysdale, who's going to talk to us about the most recent legislative session relating to the Consumer Finance Act and Florida's PACE program. Thank you both.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for attending today. We're very excited to have so many people that are interested in what happened last session, and I think last session is a good place to start because if something legislatively different or unusual, at least in my eyes, being a neophyte at it, was going to happen, it happened this session. So it's going to be an interesting look back, perhaps, and then we'll give you some ideas about what you can do next. Laura, you can, or Jorge, I'm sorry. So we're going to be talking specifically about 3 bills that were filed in this last session, and talk about the substantive problems, I'll say, with these bills, and then thoughts on the next steps, specifically relating to the Small Loan Act, that's 516, and PACE loans, the Property Assessed Clean Energy Act types of. I'm calling them a loan. They're technically not loans in the same way that a lot of transactions that are really loans are not called loans, but we'll get into that. And the reason why we're doing this now, thanks, Laura, is that people are wondering, session's not even going to be until 2025, but right now is the time when we have to start looking at issues. We have to start drafting legislation or edits to bills that we think need to be amended. We have to start shopping for legislators, and we'll get into that. But this is not by any means premature to start getting into these topics, because now is the time we have to be acting if we want to get involved. So basically how it starts is that y'all go to somebody, organize a group of people when you find something that's wrong with the Florida state law that you think should be changed, and you think you have a suggestion for how it should be changed. So that's one way of getting it started. But generally speaking, because of the political climate in Florida, more recently, we learned that the industry is talking to legislators about a bill, and it's something that we need to be involved in. Or another organization reaches out, or we see in our litigation a problem happening consistently. Sometimes a lobbyist, an industry lobbyist, will contact you directly. Sometimes a legislator will. So it's sometimes quite hit or miss as to when we learn of bills. There are services through the Florida legislature that you can put in keywords and be alerted if something happens or something is filed. Alice is an expert at that. I'll turn this over to her, but I find that process to be rather hit or miss. And she's also going to talk about how, when reporters get involved, how that affects the lobbying effort.
I'm sorry, Lynn. I'm not. Did you want me to go talk some more on this slide? You're muted. I'm very sorry.
I apologize. Jorge, could you advance the slide? I think we're finished with this one. Thank you.
Okay, so we had basically 3 ways that we learn about bills. Of course, there are many other ways, but for the purpose of our discussion, we were going to look at the 3 ways that we learned about the bills this session.
We may have lost Alice. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Lynn, Alice, you there?
Yes, you can't hear me?
Now you can. You were frozen for just a moment.
Okay, sorry about that. So at any rate, we learned about earned wage act from an excellent article by Jason Garcia, who did an extensive analysis of earned wage access. And so that's an excellent way for us to learn about a bill. So next slide. So when we learn about a bill, however we learn about a bill, the first thing that you have to do is you need to reach out to other organizations. And this has become even more imperative on consumer legislation, because there is no entity in Tallahassee that is solely focused on that. So the first thing you do is start rounding up the usual suspects, and you see a list of them there. And I want to highlight two organizations, the NAACP Florida State Conference and the Florida Catholic Conference of Bishops. Both have an extremely strong economic justice plank in their legislative agendas, and they are always board. Obviously, also Jacksonville area legal aid is always on board with Lynn Drysdale. But that's the first thing that you do. Next slide. So you start with your coalition, and then you begin to analyze the bill, and you're working with possibly other lobbyists or organizations who do not have the depth of knowledge you might have about the particular issue. So one of the first things you need to do is analyze the bill. And it's easiest to put this into what we call a one-pager that these coalitions that you have paired with can then carry around to legislators, can share in their offices, can themselves. In addition, for a lot of these issues, time permitting, you want to do a more lengthy white paper. And these one-pagers have to be constantly updated. Sometimes the bills are different in the two houses, and frequently as a bill moves through session, it morphs rapidly. So you have to constantly be changing this one pager. Next slide. So this first scenario of earned wage access is one that we're really happy about because, as you can see highlighted there in red, the bill died. It never got a hearing. It never progressed. Nothing ever happened. So this is your best scenario. You had your coalition. People were already talking. You had your one pager. In this particular case, you had national organizations helping. So this is a beautiful result. In addition to Jason's article that really kicked it off, this is the result you want. So this is the Senate version, and next slide just shows you the House version died without going anywhere. Next slide. Okay, Lynn, I don't have the number. I'm not seeing a number on these, so you just tell me when you're ready to step in.
Yeah, I can go ahead if that's easier. And I think that just to add that third, I mentioned the small loans and the PACE, but that earned wage access, some of you may have been seeing lately in the news, a lot of conversation about Chime and some of those different types of payment vehicles. And so I'm wondering if part of what was going on behind the scenes was just that the industry was having concerns. So now we're turning to just each year. So all during session, the bill changes. It's amended. It's there's strike-alls. There's delete this. It's always an ongoing process. Which for the need for the one pagers and the white papers that we circulate when aides or people like that want information, or just when we're trying to get media interest, or when we're just trying to get support of other groups. So in 23, there were industry lobbyists shopping for bill sponsors, and so with the Small Loan Act, and in this instance, the legislators wanted to know about what the economic justice advocates thought. In other words, this was one of those unusual situations where legislators knew that we had had been involved, or Alice had been involved in the process before. And so reached out and said, what do y'all think? Y'all talk, work something out, and then come back to us. Something that was similar to happen to the old payday loan bill. Gosh, this was 10, 15 years ago. Comes back this year, and the bill sort of comes in the way where you're sort of trying to find needles in haystacks, and it just comes out of drafting and is picked up on a bill search.
Lynn, if I could jump in here, I just want to point out that in 2023, I had left Florida. I was not a registered lobbyist. So who the legislators contacted were both or who the lobbyists contacted were both the NAACP of Florida and the Florida Catholic Conference of Bishops, because those two entities have been carrying the water for us, working on these issues in industry. So they have been very crucial in supporting advocacy for low income. So just wanted to point out, it wasn't me they contacted, it was the two of them, and then they reached out to me. So that's how it came about.
Well, and I'm not sure when an appropriate time to bring this up is going to be, but it is interesting that our main consumer protection lobbyist in Florida now lives in California. I think, and we'll talk about this later in the presentation, but I think we have it in us to get involved and make these things a real Florida process. So looking forward to that. Next slide, please. So another type of first step is that when you start reaching out for other organizations, and you'll see this extremely long list that Alice and others have been able to put together to speak to the small loan lending acts. So this is a group, and Alice can add, but that has been working together for quite a while. And it's a strong group. There's some groups, and Alice has mentioned most of them, that are going to be more active, but you've still got people who are going to be willing to send letters and show that it's more than just a legal services or a lawyer type of issue.
And I just want to add here that this is already, you see the list of this loose coalition, but this represents the need for someone to reach out to these organizations. Depending on the complexity of the issue, you've got to explore these organizations to participate.
You really have to do a lot of educational work and recruitment. Yes. Next slide. Okay, so here we are with the one pager specifically to the Small Loan Act, and so you can see here that it's got stats, it's got numbers, it shows specifically the differences in how the interest rates are going to be raised. And also, one thing that I think was really important to mention with respect to this year's effort is that when the bill passed and was waiting for the governor's signature last year, he vetoed it. So we were hoping that there would be some incentive to do the same thing this year. But, and Alice, I think you have a lot more information about how that ended up playing out in the end when it before and when it hit the governor's desk.
And I just wanted to add here, again, not to beat this drum too loudly, but Lynn and I prepare all of these one-pagers and white papers because you have to have some base of knowledge to create this for the other organizations that are supporting your issue. And so, as I said here, sometimes you have to prepare a lot of these because the bill continues to change. If you will notice at the top, this white paper is the same for the two bills, which is good. The bills looked alike, but it did continue to change throughout the session. So you have to constantly be updating this, organizing your calls with your coalition, explaining to them changes in the bill, and providing them with the paper material that they can use to lobby their legislators.
Okay, next slide, please. So I think we've covered this one. Alice, anything that you'd like to add to what happened at the end of the session right before the governor signed the bill?
Sure. That the bill we are looking at, which we'll discuss a little bit more later, it passed. And the last step, the last kind of Hail Mary that you're going to do will be a veto request. And again, someone with some substantive knowledge, and it's been Lynn and me, you draft a veto letter, and then you've got to go around and solicit organizations to sign on to the veto letter. So all of that takes time and effort and a base of knowledge to reach the point where, you have something to submit. As Lynn said, in 2023, our veto letter worked. In 2024, the bill had improved in that the interest rates were made slightly less predatory. And so the veto letter did not work. But I will say that Governor DeSantis signed this bill in the very end of June. It was one of the last 6 bills that he signed into law, so he was giving it a lot of thought about whether to veto. Next slide.
So the third topic of legislation that we wanted to talk about are the PACE home loans, and I'll talk a little bit more about what those are. But the way this happened, I think it was very similar to the way the title loan effort went many back in the early 2000s, where you have a problem and you have the industry and consumers both thinking that there needs to be a fix. But both of them having very divergent views on what the fix would be. So this year, I think this is the 4th or 5th year of recent history where there have been the Florida legislature has made the promise to go in and make these loans that create a super lien. It's a non-ad valorem tax assessment. So it's, in theory, it's collected by local tax collectors. And so it has a very effective enforcement mechanism. A lot of problems, really no meaningful consumer protections, which we'll also get into. So we were in a spot where there were PACE loans, super liens that were being marketed by primarily door-to-door and signed primarily with electronic devices that were just spreading like wildfire through the state. And then, so we were wanting consumer protections. And so then we had another interesting thing happen in the PACE world where a guy named Mike Moran, who at the time was a commissioner, county commissioner in Sarasota County, had previously filed a court proceeding, a court bond validation proceeding to try to obtain $1 billion in bond funding so that his organization, a private organization, could act as if it were a local government and provide PACE loans. Well, the judge agreed, even though it was filed in circuit court in Leon County, and there were basically 66 other counties that didn't even know anything about the bond validation proceeding. And so that court found that this gentleman who had gotten the $1 billion could act as his own, in effect, quasi-local government and provide these loans. So he was running through the state unchecked, even though a lot of counties, I'd say about 30 counties, had already made the decision that residential PACE, as opposed to commercial PACE, was not going to be allowed in their counties because of the lack of consumer protection and other reasons. And so this gentleman used the Leon County Circuit Court decision to just start doing loans everywhere without, any sort of oversight by local governments. And so then the tax collectors and property appraisers rebelled, some of them, as a collective group and some individually, to say, this is not our government responsibility to act as your debt collector and collect the money for your loans. So we're just not going to enroll these debts on the taxes. So a lot of drama, contractors weren't getting paid. The lenders weren't getting paid because the payments were supposed to be made through the tax collector's office or through mortgage escrow or however else you pay tax related assessments. So things were crazy pre-session. And so this session, we were in sort of chaos because we were trying to get consumer protections, but we didn't get all the consumer protections we needed in the bill that would stop the actions of this gentleman who had set up himself as his own little government entity. So that's the third scenario, taking us into the 2024 session. There were a lot of reporters that were coming in with horror stories about PACE loans, but all these bills were found in just a regular search.
Yeah, and I might add that, this was a whether we should make the Herculean effort to try to file our own bill. And I'm sorry, my internet connection is unstable. And which is a huge amount of work because we would have to draft the legislation and then seek bill sponsors. And ultimately, as Lynn said, we found this bill when it popped out of bill drafting. But that's always an issue also, is do you affirmatively file something for a variety of reasons, either to create some contrast to an industry bill or to get ahead on the issue. So, there are lengthy discussions leading up to the session, which cannot start too early.
Next slide, please. So as with the Earned Wage Access Bill and the Small Lending Act bill, first step is gathering like-minded people and organizations. So you will see that the list for PACE was quite a bit shorter, but we do appreciate the support of the National Consumer Law Center and the Center for Responsible Lending and some of those nationwide organizations. I think the problem is the concept of a PACE transaction is so foreign. The language that they use in these transactions is sort of quasi-lending language, and it relates to it's an assessment as opposed to a mortgage or a that type of purchase money or any other type of loan. So it was hard to recruit organizations to become involved. Next slide.
I just wanted to add real quickly that in addition to what Lynn was saying, this is a PACE term is a fairly complex issue. And again, you could have had a much lengthier coalition. Many of the organizations opposed to other forms of predatory lending would also have opposed the PACE loan bill, but it becomes an issue of time. You only have so much time to spend with each individual organization and to explain to them the issues with the bill and how it might impact the constituency with which they work. So that has been a problem with PACE for all the years that it has been an issue at the legislature, which has been many. So.
Yeah, so this is the one pager that was put together, or one of the versions of the one pager that was put together for PACE, and not like the previous bills. The PACE bills were not the same in the House and the Senate, which also leads to an issue at the end where they have to marry the versions together. But so we were doing one pagers and position papers and that sort of thing just in real time quite frequently, and trying to get them out and get that sort of information to the media. Another part, a really important part of this that I don't think I've mentioned yet, but it reminded me in speaking of the media, is if you can't do anything else, if you can't send an email message, if you can't send a letter, what we really need is an ability to explain to legislators how the problem affects people in the real world. Because I've found that when I'm speaking to the legislatures, their understanding of what goes on in our world, specifically as consumer protection attorneys, and what they think goes on in our world, are two totally and completely different things. For instance, with PACE, it was, when I would go testify, it was always presented as a government benefit of sorts, a government program, sort of a handout, so to speak, because you would be getting rebates, federal, state, you'd be getting energy credits with your local energy authority, one-on-one. You could probably at some point go off the grid. All of these sorts of things that people are being told that are not accurate, and created, and then they're bundled into a very a high priority loan. So those types of things, the legislators had no idea about. They had no idea that these loans had an interest rate of 11%. None of them would have even considered signing an 11% mortgage at this point. So it's real important to have stories. Sorry for the diversion, but if anybody could, just putting together stories, I think is very effective for media as well as for the legislatures to see what's really going on.
And if I can just follow up with that, I feel like, I don't know if anyone else has been watching or watched the Tour de France, but I feel like Lynn is the Phil Liggett, providing all the nuts and bolts in law, and I'm just here for the color of what goes on down at the legislature. So I just wanted to point out one issue when I had this session with this bill, or with this issue, is what's called strike all. So what frequently happens with these bills is, and the session gets faster, you get less notice as you progress through the 60 days. And so sponsors will file what's called a strike all. So it's an entirely new bill. It's completely new bill that can often come out with just 24 hours notice. And in the case of PACE, this was, I don't know, maybe a 35 page bill. So you've got to have somebody who is looking for the strike holds, who finds them at midnight, who analyzes them, and who, if at that point, you're not going to update your one pager because you don't have time, but you've got to be prepared if you're so lucky as to have someone as knowledgeable as Lynn drive to Tallahassee to testify. So again, these are issues that need to be addressed through a systemic process to provide some representation for consumers at the legislature.
Next slide, please. And oh, by the way, I know we might not be painting a very appealing picture of the day-to-day aspects of lobbying, but I think that's what's so important about today. I think if we can gather a group of like-minded people, these tasks wouldn't be so all-encompassing. They could be, you know, just little somebody does something here or there. Everybody's got different talents, so I think the larger the group, the less daunting it is. So as Alice mentioned, the bill passed, and we were really in sort of a dilemma here, because a bill passed that would deal with the Mike Moran problem of him just setting up his own private PACE empire in Florida. And just another little segue, there was recently an article that came out about how Mr. Moran spent some of the $1 billion that he got for PACE funding. A lot of it was spent on like Smith and Wolford in New York, and some really nice dinners in Vegas and some other places. So it was a pretty damning article, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about later. But anyway, they had $900,000 of the money they spent, and I couldn't tell for certain if this was part of the PACE money or part of his own money. I suspect the latter, or at least should say that. But $900,000 was spent to lobby against the bill this year, the consumer protection bill, the bill that got rid of him, not so much consumer protections, but he was very interested in which bill passed. So we were supporting a bill that wasn't as strong on getting rid of the Moran problem, but had more consumer protections, not significant consumer protections, but more. So at the end, when it passed both bodies and went to DeSantis, we had to figure out, and interestingly enough, you find strange allies in these fights, because some of our allies in the PACE battle, if I can call it that, were the mortgage bankers. And so we had a very unique opportunity to share efforts and thoughts and work with the mortgage bankers on this one. So these are the groups that were involved, and you see a lot of individuals that were involved in this, as well as the two national organizations that we mentioned earlier. So we decided on sending out a veto letter. Interestingly enough, the veto, so now, you know, PACE is trying to move into the different counties now that the global Moran effort won't work. And so we're being contacted by people wanting to get the information from our veto letter, because they're working for local governments and they want to make sure that it's real, that their legislators know that there is, despite what the industry says, there's no real consumer protection component to the new legislation. Next slide, please. So this one, oh, go ahead, Alice.
Well, I was just going to say, just real quickly, I think I've mentioned most of this as we've moved along. Again, you know, as a pro bono attorney helping out, I'll say my agenda here today is to encourage someone in Florida, whether it is a bar organization that has funding for legal services or some entity, there needs to be funding to do legislative work. And I just wanted to make it clear that a lot more goes into it than what we've presented today, which is why you really need people full-time working on these issues. As I've explained, it's a lengthy process to organize your coalition. You've got to analyze the bills, draft papers. You need someone with boots on the ground in Tallahassee. You need to pursue reporters. You need to prepare press conference. These things don't happen unless somebody does it. And first and foremost, staff and legislators need to have someone who's listed as a lobbyist and that they know they can call, who is conversant in these issues. Next slide. So we're just going to break down the amendments real quickly here. So next slide. So Chapter 516 was amended. The small dollar loan bill, if you may or may not know that it is one of several carve-outs to Florida's criminal usury rate. If you don't know, these listed here are some of the licensed lenders under Chapter 516. There are many others. There's almost 400 licensees. Their hallmark is they do have storefronts, but they also operate online. These loans can be secured or unsecured. They sell ancillary products, which is a huge problem. You probably know that Title Max does a balloon payment, effectively a car title loan, through Chapter 516. These are written, but it's all proprietary, so we don't really have any idea what these corporate entities do to determine if a borrower can actually pay the loan. And of course, there's no ban on forced arbitration. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through this. That's just in a nutshell the gist of what we were most concerned about. These are some pretty wicked increases in interest rate for consumers under these loans. But had the bill passed in 2023, it would have been even worse. So that's a small success we can at least look at. Next slide. And finally, I will just say data collection is always an issue. This industry has had no data collection. They themselves wrote into the bill some data collection, the way to sell the bill, because they know that's an issue. So we'll now have some data that you all can access through public records. Next slide. I'm going to let Lynn handle this.
So we've listed, just in case you're seeing these types of loans that are sort of quasi payday, quasi title, they're just a mismatch. It's the Chapter 516 loans. And unfortunately, there's no private right of action contained within the law. I can't remember, honestly, the last time a Florida consumer protection law passed that did provide a new private right of action. But in these cases, we've litigated some of them with Title Max and others. Certainly, there are methods by which they make the disclosures that are required by the Federal Truth in Lending Act look accurate, but what's going on in these is a lot of times the forced sale of ancillary and other worthless products that should be really treated as interest, increasing the actual interest rate on the loan, making all of the disclosures wrong. So that's generally the context we see that in. But we also see unfair practices relating to e-signing. So you've got the federal and the state law there, but just people signing documents that that if you go through the IP information, you'll see that they didn't really sign. And of course, Federal Truth in Lending Act, because the cost of credit it may not be obvious from the face of the document, but there may be some hidden things going on. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. These loans are quite frequently rolled over, or are extensions made. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act has two different sections to it. One of them is prohibiting discrimination in the provision of credit, and that is it's not limited to individuals. Small businesses are included as well. So that's part of it. But the other part of it is if you deny somebody a loan, extend a loan, or do something in the change the terms of a loan, or do something negatively affecting one's use of credit, then you have to give them a very specific letter as to why you did this. Think a Fair Credit Reporting Act type of letter. Credit Repair Organizations Act, because a lot of these companies are promoting themselves as providing financial assistance and support to consumers by giving them these really high cost loans. A lot of these transactions, if not 100% of them, are dealt with through the electronic funds transfers or through automatic debits from banking accounts. So these two federal laws, I think, could be extremely effective in dealing with these types of loans. And I think even because of the types of loans they are, if you have those two last types of issues, or perhaps a truth in lending or a truth in lending issue, I think those might even be classable. Next slide, please.
And I just wanted to throw in here real quickly that my internet connection is unstable, so I don't know if you can hear me. I just wanted to throw in real quickly that Lynn and I probably diverge here because I'm not that connection. I look like I'm okay. I just want to say that that list of legal tools, they're not easy ways to address the problems with these loans. They do exist, but there's nothing that makes it easy for you to help a client when they come into the office. To my mind, the best way to address this is to go to the core, the base, the start, and address this at the legislature by fighting this legislation and by seeking affirmative changes where you can. So I think that you all need to do a greater push to see that happens, since some of these legal tools are not that easy to use. So.
I think that's particularly important since you really need to show a groundswell of support for the position you're taking, whether it's in support of or opposed to legislation. And so I look at laws and I think how bad they are and how they're not helpful to my clients. But if I'm not doing anything to change them, as futile as it may seem at times, then I think I'm not doing everything I can, but it's certainly not what everybody can do. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to go through this really quick, just so we'll have a little bit of time at the end. So all of this started as just a tax in tax-related statutory provisions, because it was providing something that the local governments could do to set up a process by which it could provide funding through closely monitored funding sources and through a program administrator. But anyway, it didn't start out to be what it became under Mr. Moran's version. So, and it's an Obama era program. So the tax protection referendum was back in 2010. So it's been around a while. Then there was a lot of litigation testing the bond issues surrounding PACE, as you can see now. There should have been. And so the 2024 is that court case I talked about from Leon County that created this huge wave of PACE loans, not affiliated with local governments, being provided throughout the state. Next slide, please. So this is the name of the case. And so what the court basically did was broaden the term local government so that this quasi-government agency could come in and start doing whatever it wanted to do. The legislation was filed because it was a mess and they wanted to stop this guy. They threw in some consumer protections, but not many. So there were competing bills going through. Now, keeping in mind that there were a lot, at least say 30-ish counties that had already banned residential PACE in their jurisdictions by ordinance or referendum, but a lot of the places where they were newly doing PACE loans, it was literally against the law, but of course they used the Second Circuit opinion to say, county, city, your laws don't matter to me. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's a super priority lien. That's why the mortgage bankers didn't like it. If anybody handles door-to-door home improvements, litigation, scam type stuff, just substitute the type of financing with PACE, strip the consumer protections, and you can use all of your home improvement skills, less the consumer protections. In handling PACE cases. There's some differences because they're assessments and not loans and et cetera. But so if you're handling home improvement, you probably hear quite frequently that the transaction was handled on a handheld device, that the person only saw one human who was either somebody bird dogging for either a lender or a contractor, or it's contractors going door to door. And so the homeowner never knows that there's financing involved because they may see one screen on a handheld, and that one screen they have to sign. So that means that they have just electronically signed a sales and labor contract as well as a financing contract. And so they're told, not to worry about payment because it's, it's government rebates, this, that, and the other thing. And so they've not usually, or quite frequently, they've not received the electronically signed documents the day of signing as required, which is a violation, of course. But all sorts of promises are made. Next slide, please. So we did get, in theory, although it does sometimes seem like a game of whack-a-mole, the Florida PACE Funding Agency issue, that the problems with the bill that we included in our veto letter is that there's no loan to value ratio concern. So as if we never went through 2008, you could over leverage property with your PACE loan. They're supposed to determine the ability to pay and do normal type of underwriting, but since it's a non-ad valorem assessment, they don't really care that much about it, and so they failed to properly define annual income. So the ability to benefit test is worthless. They're not covered by TILA, but they are required to provide right of rescission because it's home improvement, because it's usually door to door, because the FTC cooling off period. And so they will provide the notice of the right to rescission, but it'll be a paragraph buried in a 21-page document on page 18. They have to provide other cost of credit information, not under the strict guidelines of TILA, but you might find that at the very back of the contract. Next slide, please. So there's no interest rate cap. So we see them anywhere from 9% to 11% on these fully secured super liens. There's no private right of action, no remedy against the administrator for not handling the price, the administrative part of the case, the PACE transaction properly. And a person will get a water heater and have a 30-year loan. Most water heaters I'm aware of don't last 30 years. Certainly roofs don't. So the length of the liens will outweigh or outstrip the useful value of the improvement. They've made some concessions towards that in the new legislation, but certainly we don't feel it's enough. Next slide, please. So remedies section will be very short. So you've got Electronic Signing Act violations, which you can, weave into a UDAP claim, perhaps. You've got your common law claims. And as I mentioned, Truth in Lending, Reg X, not going to apply. And then also the Equal Credit Opportunities Act for not providing proper notice of when changes are made to one's access to the credit. Like now, when the property appraised, I guess the FPFA didn't think that they just assumed the property appraisers and tax collectors would all be very happy in enrolling and collecting and doing their debt collection for them, and they didn't anticipate that there would be that sort of revolution against it. And so, as I mentioned earlier, contractors are not getting paid, the FPFA, whose contract says that the only way to make a payment is through a tax assessment, is contacting borrowers and telling them to tell their mortgage servicers to artificially increase their escrow and pay it that way, or just pay it in a lump sum. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we are.
I'm just going to say real quick, because we're running out of time here. The tools, as you can see, are limited. I've already talked about that. That's why, in my opinion, again, I'm speaking for myself, the luxury of not being a paid employee, my work life has ended. So, I think that this needs to be addressed through active representation of low-income consumers at the legislature, and there needs to be funding for that. So next slide. So just to be clear, what has become what I have been aware of for a long time is that Florida is the only state without at least one lawyer-led organization dedicated to advocacy for low-income consumers at their state legislature. I think there is this misconception that this work is highly partisan. I think the Florida bar, I'm sorry to say, has that assumption. This work is not partisan. This is nonpartisan work. Legislators on both sides of the aisle seek your opinion as consumer advocates, as those being knowledgeable on those issues. Over my 30 years, legislators from both sides of the aisle, and certainly their staff, would reach out to me about these issues. So I think that it is incumbent that we find a way to create dedicated funding, a dedicated entity to work on these issues here in Florida. I think that's our last slide.
Yeah, and I think that's an extremely strong message, because we can do this presentation and then we all go back to doing our usual things. But and I'm very I hate to mention a committee or meetings or anything like that, but I think it would be helpful if anyone is interested in getting involved now to see what issues, if they have issues they want to bring up, to see what we can do. So I'm happy to be the recipient of the emails if anybody would like to join in a group like that to carry this forward. It's lynn.drysdale@jackslegalaid.org.
Thank you both so much for your wisdom and your inspiration. These issues are so important to our clients and to society. And so we hope that someone or some way we will find to step up and make sure that we continue to have a voice with the legislature. I know it's 1 o'clock, so we will wrap up. There's no open questions at the moment. Jorge, anything else?
I've been dropping a lot of information in the chat, including resources. The CLE code, I'm going to read it out loud just in case. It's 2407849N as in Nancy. You're all going to get an email within 24 hours, which is going to have a link to this recording. It's going to have a link to the materials. I'll try to include the chat conversation, so it includes all the links I've been dropping in there related to the presentation. Just one final plug for one of the podcast that was recommended there. I subscribed to it earlier today. It's amazing. There's a lot of great articles. There were things that I didn't know about that really changed my perspective when it comes to some of the emerging issues that we handle. Also, this is kind of a big plug for Pills. Like when I joined Pills, I was lucky enough to join the consumer tenant group, and I have a group of great people here that I meet monthly with. So it's a great group to join. Just being part of that work group alone is definitely worth it. These are the type of high-level discussions that we have, and it really helps putting together trainings like these together. And speaking of trainings like these, I dropped 2 links to recent PACE trainings that we've had. So if you want to see this as a series, all of those are dropped in there. So I don't know if, as Laura mentioned, I don't know if there are any questions. I know we're a little bit over time, but if you have anybody that attended the training or watched the recording has any questions, just shoot us an email and we'll make sure to get those questions to the speakers and we'll get back to you with the answers. I want to thank Lynn, Alice, and Laura for being here today. As always, you're amazing speakers and we're lucky to have you here. So I think I did see a question drop here.
It looks like Alice answered one. And then there was a question about trying to get the Florida AG to be more proactive. I think there was some movement in the AG's office on PACE. I think they did oppose the bill, correct? No, they support.
No, historically, the Attorney General, historically, every cabinet and agency in Florida rarely takes a legislative position. That is just the way Florida works. Sometimes the Attorney General's office in the past has provided stakeholder meetings that they have participated in, or they have in fact reached. They know is working on consumer issues, they will reach out. But Office of Financial Regulation, Department of Insurance, the AG, Financial Services, they do not generally take legislative positions. But again, if a dedicated person working on these issues, it is important to establish a relationship with all of these entities and work with them. So, good question.
I was thinking that the Attorney General did file an amicus brief in the appeal in the bond validation proceeding. That's what I was thinking of. All right. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.